guys, how's it going? Welcome to this episode of Pete's 2 Cents. I hope you're going well. This is where I'm going to be just answering some of your questions, sharing my opinions, giving you guys my 2 cents, right? That is an expression that we can use in English to mean your opinion. What's your 2 cents? This is just my 2 cents. So guys, it is currently the 7th of August on Sunday night. It is almost 10 p.m. and I am up because it has been an incredibly hectic week and I haven't managed to record another episode to get up tonight. So that is why I'm doing this episode. So if you are listening to this on a Sunday or even a Monday morning, I have only just recorded and published this episode. Now, the reason I've been so busy is because earlier this week, we got approved for a house loan. So we had gone to our mortgage broker, given them our income details, our savings details, all of that sort of information associated with getting a bank loan. And then after several weeks of them talking with, I think we're going with the Commonwealth Bank here in Australia, we finally got approved. And I might do an episode with my wife and sort of give you guys the down low, right? Tell you all about that and how that's gone. But the amazing news is that we bought a house yesterday. And it's still kind of surreal, right? Like, it's just, you guys may not know if you don't live in Australia, but house prices here are just ridiculous. They're off the frickin' charts. They're off the chain. They're off the planet. They are incredibly high for the most rudimentary kind of house. So it's just something that growing up here and being accustomed to the price of houses nearby, I just never really thought this was ever going to happen. Right? So, and I guess it hasn't happened yet, but we have put in an offer. The offer's been accepted and it will probably be ironed out, sorted out, organized this week. So yeah, assuming that, I guess, the building inspection all goes to plan, goes well, and the bank gives me the finance that they approved me for. So anyway, yeah, still just sort of shocked that I finally managed to purchase a house with my wife and we'll have our own place. This is our house where we can do whatever we want, whenever we want, and finally feel like a grown-up, I guess. So anyway, that is why I've been so busy this week. To sort of spoil the story, I guess, we literally went to 5, maybe 6 inspections yesterday. So actually yesterday, and ended up purchasing one of the houses that we saw, or putting in an offer and having that offer accepted for one of the houses that we saw on the day that we inspected it. So this stuff can move really quickly, especially now where the market seems to have plateaued, if not is going down. The prices are dropping a little bit because of interest rate hikes here in Australia. Anyway, that's boring, but yeah, long story short, we bought a place. We're probably going to be moving into it in the next 2 months, depending on how things go. And yeah, it's just, I'm still astonished. Still really don't know what to make of it all. All right, let's get on to some of your questions. Just let me have a quick sip of my coffee here. Okay, this one comes from Elaher. Hopefully I'm saying that right. Elaher. So Elaher has asked a product-related question for Aussie English. How can I get access to the text and transcripts of your podcast episodes? Okay, so that reminds me, these 2 cents episodes don't come with transcripts, and the reason that is because it means I can make them incredibly long if I want, and I can also publish them immediately. If I get them transcribed, it usually takes a week or so for me to get my transcriber to sit down, go do it, send it back to me, have me correct it, and it takes that person hours as well, especially if it's an hour-long episode, for them to sit down and literally type out every single word that I do. So these episodes are kind of a listening comprehension exercise, put me on, listen to me whilst you're doing your chores around the house, whilst you're commuting to work, whilst you're at the gym, going for a walk, whatever it is, and let's just hang out, work on your listening skills. It's fine if you don't understand every single word that I say. The basic idea is to just listen to what I'm saying and try and get the gist of things, try and understand the basic idea of what I'm talking about. And I'm not dumbing things down. I'm not speaking slowly. I'm not trying to speak simply. I'm talking as I would talk to another native speaker, a non-native speaker, whoever was in front of me. This is how I would speak. So that's the point of these episodes. The other episodes, like the Goss episodes, expression episodes, interview episodes, every other episode that isn't Pete's 2 cents, I believe, has a transcript. In fact, I'm thinking back, I think Pete's 2 cents episodes are the only ones that don't. Every other episode has a transcript, and that's like 1,100 and something, maybe even 1,200 episodes now. So if you want to get access to those guys, go to aussieenglish.com.au/podcast. You'll be able to find it on the website, aussieenglish.com.au, and you can sign up for the premium podcast where you'll get the transcripts, the bonus episodes, video lessons, and all the other bonus content associated with that podcast membership. You'll also get the transcript reader that allows you to listen and read at the same time, the premium podcast player. So that's great if you are working on your listening comprehension at the same time as wanting to read, pull out bits of grammar, vocab, expressions, collocations from the text that you're listening to. So that's how you can get access to that, Elaher. I hope that's helped. Excuse me if I cough a few times, guys. I'm still recovering from that last chest infection that I had from my kids. They brought it back from daycare. And the funny thing is, it's funny how that stuff spreads like wildfire. Like my parents I'm pretty sure it must be the exact same virus. Because my dad has had like literally the same trajectory of the infection that I had. Like he felt crap for 2 days and then slowly developed a really bad cough and had this kind of congestion and then has had this sort of post-viral cough that's lasted for weeks. And that is exactly what happened to me, except he seemed to have gotten it like, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks after I did. So it was really interesting to see him go through exactly what I went through, but kind of separated by 3 weeks. So I'm pretty sure he had exactly the same virus that I had. Anyway. All right, next question. This one comes from Liza, who asks, what does the expression take the angle mean? So if you take an angle or you take the angle, and you would usually say what that angle is, it's kind of your position on something, right? So if you have a certain angle, it's kind of like you're coming at things from a certain, it would be like an angle, right? A certain direction, a certain position. So I'm trying to think of a good example off the top of my head. How would you use take the angle? Take the angle. So, okay. It's really hard when they put you on the spot like this. All right, thinking. So if someone doesn't like the sale of cigarettes in Australia, right? They think it's a really bad thing overall. They think all cigarettes should just be banned, flat out. It should be illegal, right? Their angle is that they think cigarettes should be illegal. They take the angle, they take the position, they are of the opinion that all cigarettes should be illegal. Another way of using this expression, or to use the collocation like the angle, to have an angle relating to something, it's often used when talking about someone benefiting from something somehow, and them being kind of like really positive about that thing happening. So, for example, if I came to you and was like, "Oh man, you've got to go get this job. You're gonna love this job. You really need to get this job. You know, you're gonna work with my friends. You're gonna love it. You should get this job. Get this job, really." And you would be thinking, "What's his angle? Like, why is he trying to encourage me? What is he gonna get out of this? You know, why is he so positive, so pushy about this thing? Well, what does he care, right? Why do you care what job I have or what I go for? What is your angle, right?" So that's how we can sort of use it. Hopefully that's been a good explanation. Okay, next question. This was a really good one. So this comes from Giant Hogweed on Instagram. Seriously, is there an Aussie slang term for a love bite? So a love bite, at least from memory, and maybe I should Google this because I haven't really used this kind of language since I was probably a teenager. Let's type it in. Definition, love bite on Google. A love bite, a temporary red mark on a person's skin caused by a lover biting or sucking it in a sexual act. Yeah, okay, so it is what I think it is. We would call this a hickey, right? So if I type that in, and I think it is spelt, is it spelt E-Y or just Y? Yeah, so it's Hickey. And a hickey is a love bite. I love when they use these sorts of things to one expression or noun to define another one. Yeah, so it's North American slang, and we would use that here. I think love bite is a British expression that is used quite often. I would probably use hickey more than I would love bite, and I think it's because I've heard it so frequently in TV shows. But effectively, it's where you've sucked on someone's neck, usually, to the point that you've given them a bruise, right? Or a mark of some kind. So, yeah, to be honest, it's something that in Australia would be associated with teenagers. I remember there was a girl that was at my school, and this was probably like year 12. And I remember once you start getting to year 12 and people start turning 18, they start being able to drive around at night, go to parties, they can get into clubs, they can buy alcohol. All these things suddenly become legal and you kind of feel like an adult, right? So I remember her showing up to school one day and getting into a lot of trouble with the teachers because she had hickeys all up and down her neck. So she had, I don't know what the person that she'd hooked up with had done, apart from obviously suck her neck. But she'd gone to a party the night before. I remember her telling me and saying she'd hooked up with someone because I was like, what the hell happened to your neck? And he had, or she maybe, had sucked her neck up and down and left these linear bruises, like kind of like stripes, red stripes, up her neck. And so, yeah, I remember just being like, why would you do that to yourself? Like, surely, if you are want to do, right, like if you would like to suck someone's neck, surely you can do it to a point where you're not bruising them like that. Unless, obviously, the point is to leave a mark and for you to wear that mark and be like, hey, I got a hickey. So anyway, that's what a hickey is. That's what a love bite is. Okay, here we go. Oh, I love this. I seem to get this all the time, these questions. So this comes from Anthony, and he asks, I've just noticed that Aussies pronounce the O with an R at the end. So it kind of sounds like I don't know. See, yeah, I don't hear the R, but I've heard people say this quite a lot. And I think I've even heard Americans say this, like other native speakers of English say this about Australian English, and that we have this pronunciation. I think it's mainly that they find the pronunciation of O in Australian English very unique, and it is one of those vowel sounds for Australians that it does mark you instantly as being Australian. If you hear someone saying a word and they just suddenly say that O sound, O, 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 the way that we do, well, the way that I do, for me, if I hear that, I'm instantly like, bam, they're Australian. And I think it's because New Zealanders may do it to some extent, though usually there are other markers in their pronunciation that you can hear immediately and be like, they're a New Zealander, right? Like they'll say seven instead of seven, or six instead of sex, and sex instead of six, like fish and chops instead of fish and chips. But yeah, with Americans, they would say oh, right? Like the standard American accent, oh, and we would say oh. So I think what they're actually hearing is, it's not an R sound, but it is similar. The tongue is rising to make the second part, the second vowel in that diphthong. Oh, that there's two there, right? There's and there's oo. Oh, and when they hear the tongue rise to do the oo bit at the end, oh, they're hearing it sort of like an R sound, I guess. But if I were to put an R at the end of that, it'd be like oh. Like, oh, and it sounds a lot different to me. Oh. So yeah, I don't hear the R sound, but I understand where you're coming from. But as a bit of shameless self-promotion, if you guys want to learn to pronounce the Australian O, firstly, check out my free video on Aussie English, the YouTube channel. So just type in like Aussie English YouTube, pronounce O Australia sound or something, and it should come up. And it's called the Australian O. So you can go and find that. Let's see, can I find it on the podcast and what number episode that was? Let me see. Aussie English podcast episode, the Australian O. Hopefully Google will give me the episode number. Maybe not. Okay, maybe I can't find that straight away for you guys. Yeah, it should be one of the podcast episodes, obviously, too. So if you are not on YouTube, you should be able to find it on the podcast. Just do a search for Australian O. And besides that, if you want like in-depth tutorials on how to pronounce it with exercises to practice it and everything like that, as well as, all the other sounds in Australian English, go and check out the Australian English pronunciation course. You can find that at aussieenglish.com.au/APC. The letters APC. Hold on a second. I can feel my voice kind of going, so I'm having another sip of coffee before it gets too cold. All right. Let's see. Another question here. All right. So what do we got here? Okay, this one comes from Mohammed. Hi. Someone said Aussie people don't like to mimic their accent. I guess that means don't like you to mimic their accent. What's your opinion about it? For example, if an immigrant says, "G'day mate, how are ya?" It is understood that he wants to use it as a ridiculous sentence. I think this is the kind of thing where, ironically, immigrants would have the upper hand and would probably come across as more friendly by doing this than if it were an American or a British person or a Canadian or a New Zealander or someone else who's a native English speaker. Because if they do it, and you can obviously hear that they're using, say, an American accent, and they're like, "G'day, mate, how's it going?" It would sound like sarcasm, like they're making fun of us, right? It'd kind of be like if I went to the US and started greeting everyone saying, "Howdy, y'all." They would probably be like, "Fuck off, dude." Like they would think instantly this guy's being, patronizing. Right, he's making fun of our accent or something, So I think that's probably what you mean. Like, if I heard an American walk up to me and say that, like, "G'day, mate, how you going?" I mean, I wouldn't straight away be offended, but I would probably be thinking, is he making fun of me? Like, is this a joke at the expense of me being Australian? Like, "Ooh, chuck another shrimp on the barbie. Yeah, I'm gonna go, surf with the sharks and eat some kangaroo." But if you're a migrant doing it, and you're just doing it naturally, and you're just saying those phrases, we love it, to be honest. Like, the average Australian would love it. Every Aussie that I have ever spoken to about this has said they love hearing migrants who are embracing Australian culture, who are trying to use the Australian language. So I definitely don't think that you're going to get a lot of negative reactions if you were to say to someone, "G'day, mate, how are you?" Right? Obviously, if someone gives you a weird look, you can just say, "Sorry, I'm just trying to use a bit of Australian English." You could explain the situation and be like, I'm trying to adopt this country, as my country, this language, this culture, everything like that. And, if someone was still angry at you, to be honest, I would think they're a bit of a dickhead, right? It would be like, are you just a racist person then? Like, if someone has explained that the reason they're using this language is because they love this country, they're excited to be a part of it and everything like that, and you're still angry at them, then I would think they're the problem, not you. But for the most part, I absolutely love it, and it just shows that you are interested, that you are passionate about Australia, that you are invested in being Australian. So I 100% wholeheartedly encourage you guys to learn phrases like that and use them. You don't have to go overboard. You don't have to only use Australian slang, when there are other options. You don't have to always say budgie smugglers instead of speedo or swimmers or togs. You don't have to always say sunnies instead of sunglasses. But if you can mix a few of these things in, it's going to make you feel like one of us when we hear you speak. Even if you have an accent, even if you pronounce things differently, the fact that you're using those words, you're using that language, it shows that we share a bond, that we have a connection, a deeper connection, right? And I feel like this is something that's incredibly important when you have come from somewhere completely different. You haven't grown up here necessarily, and you're wanting to still develop that connection, because it's kind of like, well, how else are you meant to do it? If you don't use the language, like, that's one of the biggest ways for you to be able to show that you are embracing Australian culture and everything like that. It's to use those kinds of phrases and to try and improve your pronunciation and sound more Aussie. It doesn't mean you have to be perfect, but yeah, I would wholeheartedly say just dive in and don't be afraid to say phrases like, "G'day, mate, how are ya?" Like, again, I would love it. I would love it. And it's just one of those ironic things. If an American did it, I'd probably be like, "What are you doing? You're making fun of me?" Whereas if a foreigner who's learning Australian English did it, I would definitely not be offended at all. All right. Rant over. Some more coffee. Okay. This one comes from Mr. Vocabulary. You have a lovely moustache and beard, bro. It's hard for me to keep a beard on my face, but this one suits you. Thank you. So yeah, recently I have been... I don't know if growing a moustache or beard requires effort or it is a lack of effort. So to be honest, when I grow it out, I feel like I really am just being lazy and not doing something, right? I just let it do its thing and it grows out. But yeah, it is interesting. You don't see many people with very big moustaches. They may grow their beards out these days, but typically you won't see people with very, very lush, hairy moustaches. They might have small, neatly trimmed moustaches. You know, some of those Aussie blokes that are a bit bogan with a mullet or something might have one, just because, especially if they're in their like late teens to 20s. But besides that, yeah, you don't seem to see it. And I think, you know, even if I was to shave my beard, I probably wouldn't just leave the moustache there. I'd just shave the lot. I feel like I'd look like a bit of a weirdo walking around with a moustache. And it is one of those interesting things where it's so arbitrary, like facial hair, and what people decide is cool or isn't cool or what's in fashion and everything. You know, you see all these historic photos from the 1800s and people had things like mutton chops and big beards. And then through like the early 1900s, everyone was clean shaven. And then through the mid, you know, maybe 60s, 70s, 80s, people had moustaches. And then they started growing beards again in the 90s. So it is interesting how this kind of like rotates through. You know, we change our fashion, what's acceptable, what's popular, what other people are doing. And, you know, we decide at one time, oh my God, moustaches are gross. No one would do that. You know, it's not cool. And then a few decades later, all of a sudden it is. And then a few decades later again, it's not. And it's just so interesting that kind of rotation happens, right? Same with the mullet. The mullet was something that was big in the 80s and maybe the early 90s. I remember my parents gave me a mullet when I was a little kid. Bastards. I am never posting those photos online. But I think, yeah, I would have been like 4 or 5 years old and they gave me a mullet. Had long hair at the back, short hair on top, short hair on the sides. But probably growing up, it was something that only... I don't even really remember seeing many people with it, to be honest. Once I was at high school, it wasn't popular at all. No one had a mullet. But nowadays, probably in the last 5 years, maybe even less, it's become popular again. And I've seen kids everywhere now with mullets. They all have these mullets again. There's a slight variation on the mullet. You know, it's a little bit different from the original, but it's a mullet nonetheless. So, yeah, it's interesting to see that coming back. Okay, this one comes from Nazar, who's asking if I can let you guys know about the best Australian TV series, movies, to get familiar with the accent. Now, I remember I answered this on Instagram and I gave a very cliche kind of, answer to this question. And I'm going to give you the same one. But effectively, I would be searching for, Australian series, Australian movies on Google. And now I would be reading the excerpts and seeing which ones of those seem interesting to you. Because the biggest thing is I can give you guys suggestions all day long and you may watch them and hate them. And I wouldn't want you to continue to watch them thinking you need to do that in order to, improve your English. Ideally, you would find any show that, is made by Australians with Australians in it, but that is your type of show. If you're into chick flicks, right? Romance movies and rom-coms, right? Romance comedies, that sort of stuff, then I'm probably not going to be able to suggest things for you because I don't watch those things very often. They're not my cup of tea. They're not really my thing, but there's probably loads of them out there that have been made in Australia that you would love. So yeah, that's why I give this sort of answer, right? I'm very, I've got my taste. I've got the things that I like. And I can give you suggestions. In fact, I have a video up, Aussie, English, YouTube, Australian TV shows and movies. Type this in and it is 20 plus movies and TV shows in Aussie English. You'll find that on my YouTube channel. And I list these all for you. But yeah, the reason that I am sort of hesitant to suggest loads of things is because you may not like them. And I wouldn't want you to watch them because I've suggested them if you don't like them. So I would get on, say, iView, So let's find the website for you. So iView, I think it's just .com.au. Let me see. Yeah, iView, like the letter I, view, VIEW.com.au. Go sign up to that, and it's effectively free Netflix for Australia. So this is run by the government, so it's ABC, and you can sign up. You can sign up for free, and you will be able to watch these shows online. So I really recommend doing that and just trying to find stuff that interests you. You know, trying to find different shows that you're really enjoying watching, but that you can also study and really enjoy at the same time. Because ultimately, the best resources for you to learn English are ones that are obviously at or above, just above the level that your English is at, but they're going to be ones that you really enjoy. So it doesn't feel like a burden. It doesn't feel like study. You're not going to get that feeling of, I don't want to watch another episode of this, but I'm going to because I want to study. Okay? So, yeah. Hopefully that answers your question, Nazar. Okay. You know what? The worst thing about having a moustache that's really, really big, really lush, is that if you drink anything from a cup, like especially coffee, it gets stuck in your moustache. It gets stuck in the top of your moustache, and you're constantly having to kind of like suck the the coffee out of your moustache or wipe your face with a napkin or something. It's just the most annoying aspect of having a moustache. Okay, this one comes from Zach, who was asked, I think he means, is it easy to make friends with Australians? So yeah, this is one, I don't think that Australian people are very difficult or easy to make friends with, any more so than anyone else anywhere else in the world. You know what? That might be a lie. We are pretty laid back, so it is probably somewhat easier for you to sort of meet the average Australian and potentially strike up a conversation and get to know them a little bit better than maybe someone from, a different country. But, I remember answering this on Instagram and saying it was hard even for me to make friends at my age. And the biggest thing is that people are busy. That's the hard part, right? When you're no longer at school and you're no longer at uni and you're no longer sort of learning, somewhere, getting an education and sitting around all the time with the same bunch of people all the time, it's kind of hard to just make friends easily and quickly because most people have their life kind of taking over everything and they're not in large groups anymore. Once you get, a full-time job, you might see a handful of people at your daily work, and a lot of the time it's kind of a professional environment, so you might not feel comfortable trying to really, become really, really, really good friends with someone that you're working with. But then you go home and you've got kids, or you've got, a girlfriend or a boyfriend or a wife, a husband, and they take up a lot of your time, and so it becomes pretty difficult to kind of meet new people and then not only just meet them, but have the spare time to invest in order to develop a friendship with those people. I think I remember reading a study somewhere that was saying, in order to create a very good friend, right, like a best friend, you need to invest something like 200 hours in that relationship, right? Which is, it doesn't sound like a lot, but it's quite a lot of time to spend with someone, right? Like imagine if you caught up with them for about 45 minutes a day, it would take a year of doing that for you to become really, really good friends, close friends. So that's why I think it's very difficult at a later age for this to happen, because it's very rare for that to just happen naturally. Obviously, if you're at school or something, that happens, inevitably. You can't avoid that. You're going to see the same people for probably more than 45 minutes on a daily basis, 5 days a week at the same place, and inevitably end up making friends with those people. But as an adult, it's kind of hard. Like I remember we tried to make some friends recently that we were interacting with at our kids' swimming lessons. And it was so hard. I really put myself out there and was trying to, get to know them. We were chatting the first time. We both sort of, there were two couples, right? There was me and my wife, and there was this other woman and her husband there with 2 kids each. We had 2 kids each. And I remember just sitting there and was chatting to the woman about, how are you surviving? Because she had a very young baby. And I was like, I've got 2 kids as well. They're 2.5 and less than 1 at the time. It's a massive struggle. How are you surviving? You're doing okay? You're going through the same issues? And we ended up chatting for like half an hour. So because that conversation kind of happened and we ended up chatting for quite a long time, at the end of it, and her husband had come over, my wife had finished swimming lessons with Noah, and so she came over and we were all kind of just hanging around and chatting. Because of that situation, I was kind of like, hey, can I give you my number or can I get your number and maybe we can catch up sometime and, hang out with the kids together. And that happened. So I got their number and again, it was me kind of like, hey, it's Pete. How are you? Did you want to catch up this weekend? You kind of have to jump on it straight away. Otherwise, everyone forgets and it's a bit weird if you message the person a month later instead of, immediately. So you do kind of have to bite the bullet and put yourself out there. And so that's a big thing too. A lot of people just aren't willing to do that. I feel like it's something that I feel is pretty uncomfortable. Like personally, I kind of don't like doing it, but I know that this stuff isn't just going to happen on its own and that I really want to develop these kinds of friendships. And you never know if you're going to become best friends with the next person you're going to bump into. So you have to kind of try and give yourself as many reasons or as many opportunities, I want to say, as possible in order for that to happen. But long story short, we kept sort of asking these people to hang out with us and we caught up with them a few times and then I think they kind of ghosted us so that we we messaged them and asked if they wanted to hang out one weekend and they were like, oh, we're busy, we've got family over, but we'll, and in fact, I don't think they followed up. They just said, sorry, we're busy, we've got family over, and then that was it. And then I think we replied another time or sent them a message another time and they just didn't reply. And at that point, it was kind of like, okay, message received loud and clear. They're either something incredibly dramatic has happened and they're just like, we can't respond at all. And then it sort of, ends up going to the wayside and they just forget. And it becomes this thing of, well, I can't message them now. It's been so long and they're going to feel like we've ignored them. Or they were actually kind of like, yeah, these people aren't really our people. We don't really get along with them. So let's just not reply. So anyway, that's what happened with that. And I remember it was kind of one of those moments where you're just like, oh, fuck, how hard is it making new friends? It's just such a pain in the ass to have to go through these. It's almost like dating as couples, right? Like you sort of catch up a few times and is it going to work out? Is it not going to work out? Do you have enough in common? Do you not? And sometimes people just don't give you a kind letdown. And I guess it's kind of even more awkward if you do that when people are developing friendships to be like, look, I don't think this is working out. That conversation would be a bit weird, I think. Anyway. All right, here we go. This one comes from Joseph Mayer. Is it real that you guys have Australian kangaroo hamburgers? So yes, this is something that you will see in most supermarkets, I think. If you were to go to, I don't know about IGA and those smaller supermarkets, but if you go to Coles or Woolworths here in Australia and you go to the produce section, right, with the meat, at the back there, you will find kangaroo. You will find kangaroo steaks, you will find kangaroo sausages, often called kangaroo bangers. You will find kangaroo hamburgers. You will find kangaroo mince. So it is something that we have in our supermarkets and that is pretty popular amongst Australians. And the reason being, we have a shitload of kangaroos in Australia. A shitload. Like there are between 1 and 2, I think, eastern grey kangaroos. Probably eastern grey. I think at least, I'm not sure if when they do this count, they include all kangaroo species or if they're just including the most common one, the eastern grey. But I believe there are between 1 and 2 kangaroos for every human in Australia. So there is between 20 to 50 million kangaroos here in Australia. So there is a ridiculous number. And the reason that we have so many kangaroos is because when European colonization occurred in the late 1700s, early 1800s and forwards, a lot of land was cleared so that animals like cows and sheep and everything could graze the land. And as a result, it opened up the perfect habitat for kangaroos to feed and reproduce and thrive, because they are grass eaters, they eat vegetation. If they're living in a forest and there's lots of really big trees, then there's often less plants. There's fewer plants on the ground. There's a lot less grass. And so there's a lot less food for them. But because a lot of trees were burnt or chopped down to make way for livestock, there was loads more of these resources for kangaroos. So we have shitloads of kangaroos in Australia. And as a result, in a lot of places, they have to be culled, right? So they have to be shot and have their numbers reduced. Otherwise, they end up starving each other. So it's kind of a tragic situation because you end up with so many kangaroos in certain places. They can eat so much of the food that there's not enough left to sustain the population of kangaroos. And as a result, a lot of them end up starving to death over weeks and months and, dying horrible deaths. So in a lot of locations where their numbers are getting out of control and the local park rangers and everything are worried that they're going to just eat all the other animals out of house and home, literally and figuratively, they end up having to cull some of these animals. And I believe that these animals are then butchered and turned into dog food, fertilizer, and even food for us. So that's why. And the good thing is, excuse me, the good thing is that kangaroo meat is much more environmentally friendly in Australia. So the feet of the kangaroo do a lot less damage to the ground because the plants and kangaroos have evolved together here in Australia, whereas hooved animals like sheep and cows, they have much stronger, they've got hooves on their feet, right? So when they walk, they actually compact the soil. They push it down and compact it a lot more aggressively, and it makes it harder for plants to grow through. So if you wanted to be environmentally conscious with your consuming of meat, kangaroo is a much better selection than beef or chicken or pork. And the other thing is that they don't release methane like, say, cows. So yeah, we do eat kangaroo. All right. Ismail asks, how's the little one? So when someone says the little one, they're referring to your kids usually. They may be referring to your pets if you've got a pet that's small. But in this case, he's talking about my son. Now, my son was sick. He had, what did we think it was originally? We thought it was, I think he had gastro, right? So he had gastroenteritis, which is effectively a virus that attacks the lining of your gut and kills all the cells that line your gut that are used for absorbing nutrients from your food. And as a result, you end up having, diarrhea, vomiting, and having a bad time of it and getting dehydrated. So he had that for a day or two, and then I had that. That was good fun. And he healed up from that, but he kept getting temperatures. And we were in and out of the hospital for the last week or two, several times, because he just kept getting fevers. And it's very weird, as an adult, I think, I can't remember the last time I had like 2 fevers in a row, in the same day. You normally get a fever and that's it, right? Like you'll have the one fever and then you're kind of on the way out of having the cold or gastro or whatever the virus is that you've had or infection that you've had. But no, I kept getting them every 2 hours or so. And he probably, through the course of like a week or so, it was every single day and it was at night. And he probably had like 50 fevers over that period, right? It was almost every hour or two that he was getting these fevers, and he would go from being really energetic and happy and playing to just being completely knocked out and wanting to sleep and feeling like crap. And so we were sort of somewhat terrified, because your child could have any kind of horrible disease that's causing this to just keep happening again and again and again. So we kept going to the hospital and they were sort of like, no, he seems fine. Just, keep an eye on him, make sure he's eating and drinking. And if it keeps going, come back. Anyway, so it sort of seemed to sort of get better eventually, and then he had an ear infection. So he had like a middle ear infection, and he'd had his ear kind of annoying him for a very long time. And again, we kept going to the doctor, and the doctor was like, "Nah, his ear seems fine." And then he had his eardrum. I think it would have been ruptured, right? And the pus, the fluid, was coming out of his ear. This yellow clear liquid was coming out of his ear. And so again, we went to the doctor, and they're like, "Oh yeah, he's got middle ear infection and has to get on antibiotics." So, yeah, but besides that, he has gotten on the antibiotics and seems to be incredibly good now. So he seems to be much better, back to his usual self. His ear seems a lot better now. It's one of those things, though, that's so difficult as a dad, as a parent. Doctors are very... they're very keen, it seems, the ones that I've encountered at least, to prescribe antibiotics for pretty much anything that a child has. Has he got a snotty nose that's got green discharge? Yeah, give him antibiotics. Has he got a chest infection? Is he coughing up phlegm? Yeah, give him antibiotics. And it's one of those things where I'm kind of like a bit more conservative and feeling like, ugh, do you really want to be constantly giving antibiotics to your kid? Because, if I take them, I know that it's going to completely wipe out my gut flora, right? All the bacteria, the good bacteria as well as the bad in my gut. And you can end up, with other problems down the line as a result. Not to mention that the more we use antibiotics as a culture, a population, a society, the more the bacteria becomes resistant to it. So anyway, yeah, it is that thing. Like, we obviously accept them and use them, and Noah now feels a lot better. But it is one of those things where I try and always be like, oh, do we really need them? But yeah, I don't know. Do you guys ever think the same sort of things? Do you have that problem if you're parents with kids? Are you sort of a bit resistant every time a doctor's like, just give your kids some more antibiotics? Because, yeah, I feel like it's almost like taking a nuclear bomb to your gut and killing all the bacteria in there every single time. And a lot of the bacteria in there are actually doing good things for your health, for your body, for your mental state, right? I think they found recently in studies that your gut bacteria is associated with depression, so it's insane to think that the bacteria living inside your stomach, it could be affecting your personality, your happiness, your sadness, your emotions, everything like that. So anyway, I don't know how we ended up on that topic. Let's get to some more questions here. Okay. Oh, here you go. This is an interesting one. So Fantin, I don't know if it's Fantin, a French name, or Fantin, has said, "G'day, can you usually find berries in Australian supermarkets?" So yes, at the moment, although some of it's kind of seasonal and it will fluctuate, like it'll go in and out. You'll see some days you can go in and find strawberries, other days you won't, and you'll find blueberries and raspberries and blackberries and cherries and other things like that. Usually there'll be something there for sale in, the theme of berries. But yeah, it can rotate through, and the prices can fluctuate too, depending on the season and how available they are. If there's loads of them available, then obviously you're going to see them in the supermarkets and the price might be quite low. But if there are very few available, then the price often goes up. So yeah, but it is something very common nowadays. I remember growing up though, and we had a raspberry bush, I think, in the backyard, and that was sort of the only time I remember eating raspberries. It would be that you would go outside, pick them off the bush, during a certain period of the year where they were growing, and then you would eat them. But the older I got, the more and more common they became, and I don't know if that was because, agriculture was getting better, more people were growing them, and perhaps they were getting stored better or ripened, at different times of the year where they weren't available previously. So they kind of snap freeze them and then ripen them 6 months later. But nowadays, they're just always around. And our kids eat so many berries. It's a very easy fruit to kind of go and pick up and that they like. It's nice and sweet. You can mix it with yogurt or ice cream and it's kind of healthy. So yeah, I do definitely notice that our kids consume a great deal more berries than I ever did as a kid. Because I remember my wife pointing this out and being like, Jesus Christ, like, these kids are so spoiled. Back in Brazil, we would never just have strawberries all the time or raspberries all the time or blueberries all the time growing up. And I was like, well, it was the same for me. This is sort of a modern thing in Australia. All right, some more questions. This one comes from Matthew Angel. Matthew Angel asks, what's the difference in pronunciation between deer, spelt D-E-E-R, and deer, spelt D-E-A-R? And I think you guys just heard the fact that there is no difference. They are pronounced the same way. This is like flower, F-L-O-W-E-R, and flower, F-L-O-U-R. They're different spellings. They look weird, but they're the same pronunciation. Deer and deer. So deer as in like the animal, D-E-E-R. What's a good example? Moose are a type of deer, I guess, technically. We got all sorts of deer in Australia. Bambi was a deer. And then dear, spelt D-E-A-R, means like expensive, something to be very dear. Dear. All right. Is it easy to get jobs in Australia for the people from different countries? This one comes from Kieran. I remember answering this on Instagram too, and I gave a pretty long answer. But effectively, yeah, I think it just depends on your skill level, and it's going to depend on your English, and it's also obviously going to depend on your personality, you know? So it's very difficult to sort of just lump all people who are, say, from different countries into the same category, because I'm sure there are many people in there who do find it very difficult to get a job when they first get to Australia. And then I'm sure there are other people in that group who find it incredibly easy to get a job when they come to Australia, right? So I think it's going to revolve around those things. What level is your English at? You know, it's obviously important to have a pretty good level of English for you to get a decent job. Although it's not impossible, right? There are definitely jobs that you can get in Australia where you don't have to have amazing English. I remember working in a restaurant and having a lot of people that I was working with in the kitchen who were learning English at the time. They were going to classes and they didn't necessarily speak really, really good English, but they could get a job nonetheless and make, you know, a living doing that. It's going to depend on your experience, right? Like, are you trained in a certain area where Australia needs those people and really, really wants to hire them, right? So like, for instance, if you're a doctor or nurse, you're probably going to find it really easy to get a job here in Australia than if, say, you are a movie director or something that's less sought after in terms of visas, in terms of jobs and everything here in Australia. And then there's obviously going to be your personality. You know, are you an outgoing person who, when you have job interviews, you thrive in that environment? You know, you communicate really well, you're very outgoing and friendly, and you're the kind of person that, well, yeah, does really well at job interviews and ends up being hired by recruiters or whatever. So it's going to be a combination of all these things. I'm sure that discrimination to some degree does happen. Like, I'm not sure if your question is kind of based on whether or not you think that people discriminate against people from other countries purely because they're from other countries, you know, in spite of their English level or their experience or their religion or gender or whatever other attributes they may have. I'm sure that happens in certain places, right? But I don't think it would be very common for that kind of discrimination to be allowed, accepted, or encouraged. So yeah, definitely don't have like a bad view on what it is to get a job here in Australia. Don't worry too much. I think you'll be able to do it as long as you are working on those things. You know, your work experience, you are being proactive, and you are working on your English and communication skills. If you have all of those things kind of lined up, and you know you're applying for a job that you're suited to, then I think you're going to be treated like anyone else, right? Like my wife at the moment, she obviously speaks English as a second language. She's been, well, before she got her recent job as an admin person at a music school, she'd been applying to loads of jobs and, you know, was constantly worried about her English, but her English is fine. And a lot of the time, it wasn't about her being a foreigner that didn't go to the job. It was unfortunately things like, you know, lack of experience, or, you know, that there was someone within the business already that also applied for the job, and so they gave it to that person. So it's just a matter of just keep going, and eventually she got the job that she got. All right, I might answer one more, and then I might bugger off because it is 11:15, and I am pretty wrecked, guys. I am pretty wrecked. Okay. All right. All right. What's the best season to travel to Perth in Australia? So I've never actually been to Perth, right? This is on the other side of the country. This is in Western Australia, the west of Australia. It is the capital city of Western Australia, and it is a very long way away. In fact, if I were to say drive from my hometown of Curlewis to Perth, how far is that? It is 3,395 kilometers, and it would take 36 hours driving non-stop. So it would take a day and a half if you didn't have to stop for anything. So it is a long way away. It is a very, very, very long way away. So yeah, I've never been. If I were going there, I'd probably go in like spring I think spring would be a really good time, maybe autumn as well, but spring where you're sort of going from winter into summer would be beautiful, I think, because it wouldn't be too cold, it wouldn't be too hot. Perth's renowned for being very, very hot during summer, and I'm not sure if it's incredibly humid there, but yeah, I think probably one of those seasons. And then, if I were to go to somewhere like Perth, I would probably want to be traveling around the coast, probably north, up to, say, Sharks Bay, and check that out. But yeah, I think that would probably be when I would do it. It probably depends on you and what your tolerances are, though, for the different seasons. You could probably go at any time. Obviously, I mean, you could go at any time. There's no one who's going to be like, no, you're not allowed. It's summer, mate. Sorry. No Spaniards during summer. The Spaniards have to go during winter, mate. Sorry about that. That's never going to happen. You can go anytime, obviously. But I think for me personally, that would be when I would go, because I know that it can get incredibly hot and uncomfortable in Perth. But it can also get pretty hot down here too. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for hanging out. It's always fun. I hope you've enjoyed these episodes. Let me know what you reckon, right? If you've been enjoying these episodes and you want me to do more of them, please feel free to send me a message, say g'day on Instagram, send me a message on Facebook, or send me an email. However you want to contact me, leave me a comment on YouTube and just say, keep doing the Pete's 2 Cents episodes. I enjoy them. Because I look at the downloads and you guys download these a lot. So hopefully that means that you're enjoying them quite a bit. But yeah, anyway, besides that, thank you so much for joining me. It's a pleasure, and I will chat to you soon. See you later, guys.